Good afternoon on today's Angry Bulletin. A few hours after the FAA released information that they were going to be requiring at least 63 corrective actions from SpaceX before they would allow Starship to fly again, Elon Musk posted a spreadsheet apparently demonstrating that SpaceX has already fulfilled all of these requirements, in which case they're just waiting for the FAA. But is this true? All of this and more coming at you on The Angry Astronaut right now. Good afternoon. Once again, welcome to The Angry Astronaut. I was not planning to put out a bulletin today. I was going to give you guys a little break from content rather than overloading you, but here we go again. Elon Musk putting out some news that absolutely has to be reacted to. Some extremely bold claims. So in his tweet, for those of you who are unfamiliar with it, there's this list of 63 corrective actions that the FAA says must be taken. And according to Elon, they're all done. Starship's ready to go. All they need is just approval from the FAA and off they go. But is this true? Is this really accurate? Are these the actual 63 corrective actions that were submitted? Because this is apparently a SpaceX document, not an FAA document. And is it really completed to the satisfaction of the FAA? Have they already signed off on it, and are we just pretty much ready to go? And there are also a few corrective actions that have not been taken yet and apparently can only be taken on future flights. Is this something that the FAA is okay with, or is there a lot more to the story? Now, first of all, it's important to note that this does not appear to be an FAA punch list, but rather something from SpaceX. And although it'd be very strange to have the FAA corrective actions and SpaceX's corrective actions differ from one another, it is possible because a lot of these things may have been addressed and dealt with before the FAA ever came out with the list, and yet SpaceX still regards these issues as being important. So as far as we can tell, the tank sensing issues, aft end cavity environment failure, the booster leak mitigation, all of those issues have been taken care of. However, the Raptor leak mitigation, item number C13, improved igniter seal design, that does not seem to have been taken care of, and yet it's listed to be taken care of in a future action. In other words, not necessary on the flight of S-25 and B-9. That is an interesting detail because the FAA was very clear that all of these corrective actions would need to be completed before SpaceX could apply for a new launch license or a modified launch license. And it's interesting to note that SpaceX has not applied for this modified license, even though Elon's saying that everything's ready to go. So there was booster reliability improvement that was addressed, and apparently collateral damage from a fire during flight as well that eventually led to all of these system failures. Incidentally, some of these things are things we didn't even know happened. We weren't really aware of the fact that the booster was on fire during flight, but apparently it was. Now, under booster reliability improvement, everything is taken care of except for change certain booster valve timing. Once again, that's on a future action. Why would that have to be delayed? Not really all that sure, but the next line item, that's a little bit more telling. Raptor reliability improvement. There are 3 different line items that SpaceX apparently has not completed. Improve oxygen valve design, improve oxygen valve seal design, and improve design of hot manifold. All of these to be taken care of in future actions. Why would this be the case? Well, because if SpaceX is to launch B-9 and S-25 with the existing Raptor engines, they can't improve the design on those engines at all because they have to go with the engines that they currently have on the rocket. Is the FAA going to be okay with this? In my opinion, possibly not. Now, the final category where SpaceX has not addressed a particular line item is C49, redesigning network architecture in regards to avionics reliability improvement. The network architecture of the avionics system is an extremely sophisticated and complicated thing, something that would require a lot more work than they've probably been able to do on S25 and B9. Once again, is the FAA really okay with this? Are they okay with launching S25 and B9 if it is still a flawed rocket? And incidentally, given those engine design problems, we've already been experiencing engine failures during the most recent static fires. Will the FAA require SpaceX to do some more redesigns of the engines before they actually let this thing fly? In general, the FAA is fine with letting somebody kill themselves with their own innovation. They really don't care if somebody decides to take risks with their own lives or even the lives of their employees, so long as those employees understand the risks. But there are some other things to keep in mind as well. The FAA said the following, quote, "The closure of the mishap investigation does not signal an immediate resumption of Starship launches at Boca Chica. SpaceX must implement all corrective actions that impact public safety and apply for and receive a license modification from the FAA that addresses all safety, environmental, and other applicable regulatory requirements prior to the next Starship launch," unquote. In my opinion, there's a lot more involved there besides this checklist, and also all of the concerns, including environmental, safety to the public, etc., may include some of these line items that SpaceX says can be delayed until its future launch. Now, some of you have had a very obvious question about all of this. How does SpaceX have access to all of these corrective actions ahead of time, and how did they correct all of these issues in B9 and S25 apparently months ago when the rocket was being built, if the FAA was carrying out an independent investigation? Well, it's because most probably SpaceX made this list for them. These corrective actions are something that SpaceX themselves put together for the FAA, because the FAA is not really all that qualified to figure out exactly what went wrong with the rocket on April 20th and what needs to be done to correct it. This is in sharp contrast to how NASA handles things. You may recall that when NASA was issuing the corrective actions for Boeing's Starliner, Boeing, of course, had not carried out any of those things ahead of time, and that's because NASA carried out their own independent investigation with their own engineers, not trusting Boeing to provide that information themselves. That's something that NASA does pretty commonly, and not something that the FAA is really equipped to do, at least when it comes to spaceflight. NASA is focused on the safety of everybody involved during a launch, whereas the FAA is generally only concerned with the safety of the general public and innocent spectators, bystanders, that sort of thing. If a company wants to take a risk with their own people and with their own lives, the FAA is fairly willing to let them do that during the experimental process. This is something that allows development to take place at a rapid pace. It's more dangerous than what NASA does, but it does allow for rapid technological breakthroughs in the aviation industry. But here's my main concern. It's not just SpaceX employees who are at risk here. It just isn't. Even though the FAA on their PEA have stated that even a full-fledged anomaly is not going to present a risk to the general public, that an explosion on the pad would not be dangerous to Boca Chica or Port Isabel, I really disagree with that. And that's based on previous incidents that have taken place at Cape Canaveral that hurled debris as far as 12 miles away from the pad. And South Padre Island and Port Isabel are way closer than 12 miles. So what's the next step? Well, three things. Number one, the FAA needs to decide whether or not SpaceX has actually carried out these corrective actions to their satisfaction. Number two, the ones that haven't been carried out, is the FAA comfortable with another launch even though those missing pieces have not yet been put into place? And then finally, SpaceX needs to apply for a modified license, and the FAA needs to approve that. When is all that going to happen? In my opinion, no earlier than October, and it might be a bit later than that. Please, Cincinnati viewers and people in the Ohio area, on Thursday from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m., I have my next tour stop scheduled to take place. All of the details are in the description. Please like, please subscribe, and also please check the description for various ways to continue supporting this tour so I can wrap everything up in Los Angeles on my final stop. Looking forward to seeing all of you in the future, and as always, stay angry about space.